Let me see, this is March 29, 1993, first day of the New York closed class. Okay, you paid your nickel, so I'll give you first shot. Any questions? You mean you don't know enough to ask any questions? Yes, Jacqueline.
In your book, you state that God is not going to speak to you if you are 75% human.
I said God is not going to speak to you if you're 75% human?
Yeah.
Did I say that?
Uh-huh.
Then it must be true.
I assume it is.
That's based on our experience. That when we began as total beginners, way back in 1962, we had to study the correct letter of truth for a long time before we began to be willing to let God take off some of the onion skins, some of the erroneous concepts. In other words, we started totally human. And based on our experience, after you get to the point, it has to do with surrender. It has to do, I might say, with convincing God that you really mean it. And in the Royal Road to Reality, the first book, I talk about reaching 51%. And that after you reach 51%, you're hooked. And you will really never go back. And it also gets easier. But all of this is relative. And it was my experience that if 75% of you is still clinging to your humanhood, God waits. And he doesn't take you seriously until you have reduced the numbers. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And it's just really a question. And you know, that's an arbitrary number anyway. I mean, I don't really mean 75%. I mean a lot. That's a symbol for if you're still retaining a lot of your humanhood and still attached to the things of this world to a large degree, God waits until you have begun to be dissatisfied with your humanhood, until what you have sought from your humanhood has turned to ashes in your mouth enough times that you begin to say, this is not worth it, there must be a better way. Then he will move in and take over your instruction. That's what I meant. That clarify it?
Yeah, I was curious about it because I would say I was overwhelmingly attached to, but conversely, overwhelmingly dissatisfied.
Oh, we all, but that's true of all of us. You see, to be human is to be schizophrenic. Oh, literally, I mean that. The human world is insane. And we are split. We are two. We are this struggling, sick, sinning, and suffering human being, and there is the very presence of God in us that is still saying, come unto me and I will give you rest. We don't listen until this gets so painful. Somebody once said to me about my class, and I said, wait a minute, if you're satisfied with your life, you don't want to be here. My class is for the anguished. This whole infinite way work is for the anguished. If anybody is still what Joel calls the walking dead, sufficiently that he can find enough pleasure and enough joy and enough gratification in his human life, that's where he should be. And I would recommend, as you know, along the Royal Road, I keep saying, if you can still get a lot of pleasure out of it, do it. You know, down the road, you have to be severed from all of that. And I don't urge anybody to hurry on that. If anybody's human life is satisfying for him, use it up. It only means that it's not your time to cross the road. And it'll come for everybody sooner or later. It doesn't have to come for anybody in any one lifetime. It's really the whole thing is practical.
Peggy Lee, many decades ago, wrote a song, Is That All There Is?
What?
Is That All There Is?
What all
Words for
there is?
Life. That was a very famous song that she had written and sang.
That's right.
Peggy Lee.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Well, about humanhood.
Yeah,
Obviously.
right. Nobody's ready until he has reached that point. Is that all there is? Until I really mean it's ashes in the mouth, and we try again, and becomes ashes in the mouth, and we try again, and there's 10 minutes of pleasure, and pretty soon more ashes in the mouth. And until we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, nobody is ready to take on to himself this hard road of moving up the spiral road to infinity. Anybody else? Yes.
Can't you be satisfied with your life, or pretty happy with your life, but still have this tremendous urge to want
Oh,
God?
sure.
And
As a matter of fact, very recently, I have a lot of students who've been around with me for a long, long time, much over 20 years. And I've noticed something in the last 2 years. One by one, they're coming and say, you know, I love my life. I am so happy. They're on their destiny track. They're in careers that they love. Their life is manageable, which it was not 30 years ago. And so they are now living the life under grace. And certainly that is satisfying, but it is not human. In our lexicon, that is no longer a human life. That is a life under grace. Don't forget, I think I mentioned on the tape this morning that Joel has said, the only goal for the human race is annihilation, death, to be dead to the false sense of self. You know, that language is so easy. And the Master said it, Joel said it, Mrs. Eddy said it, and I've said it, that you have to peel off all the onion skins of your humanhood. By definition, to us, humanhood is your mistake-making faculty, as is in the glossary of the book. And that has to go, totally and completely be dead. In short, your mistake-making faculty has to go. Is that clear? So that, you know, part of why we have to have teaching, and part of the reason I write books and put glossaries in it, is because we have been so brainwashed with language that we don't really know what we think. We don't really know what we mean. We don't know how to say what we mean. We don't know how to mean what we say. An awful lot of my work over these years has been cleaning up people's language. And I don't let them get by with saying it incorrectly. When they say, I know that, I say, what? No, you don't know that by definition. Because to know means to have experienced, as is pointed out in the first book. And when you have experienced something, when you've had a God experience, you know. In the same way that if I drink this sip of water, I know water. I don't know all the water in the world, but I know what water is. And if somebody hands me something false, I can immediately discriminate, say, no, that's not it. And that's the same kind of discrimination we have to learn as spiritual students is how to tell whether it comes from God or the human mind. It takes a long time to do that. But no, there's nothing wrong with being happy.
But, I mean, being happy in your humanhood, but still have this tremendous urge to be one with God.
That is a contradiction in terms. So that the semantics of the thing here, there is no such thing as being happy in your humanhood. That does not exist. So that if you are happy,
I'm hypnotized.
you are in something besides your humanhood. Otherwise, if you are totally hypnotized and totally human, then you will be happy today and sad tomorrow. Because as Joel said on his tape today, the human mind, by definition, is the belief in two powers, good and evil. And he said, touching one, you must accept the other. And he said, remember, it's an up and it's a down, and it's an up and it's a down.
Sure.
Yeah. But, you know, if up and down makes you happy, if good today and evil tomorrow makes you happy, then I would say, okay, you're happy in your humanhood.
I mean, not all the time, but as a whole.
Well, I'm still saying, you'd have to use another name besides
Yeah.
humanhood. Because humanhood, in our lexicon, means your mistake-making faculty. People want to think that a human being and humanhood are you. They are not you. You are totally something else. You are you in reality. You're the real you, overlaid with hypnotism. And it is that hypnotism that we call your humanhood. That's the way we call it, you know. If you don't like our vocabulary, you're welcome to have your own. But for purposes of this class, you're going to have to agree that humanhood to us, in order to communicate, you have to agree with our vocabulary. And that is your mistake-making faculty. And I don't see that making anybody happy. Okay? Think about it. If you want to bring it up again, it's okay. Somebody had a hand up there. Yes.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. In your book, you say we must lay one's soul open for spiritual dissection.
Dissection?
Yes. And
Yeah.
then you also state to open your soul faculty.
Yes.
How do you do it?
Recognition. Our magic word that we've worked with for 30 years is recognition. Number one, recognizing God is. Coming someday, some point, some lifetime, that a spark awakes in us and we recognize God is. That is, we become aware. Joel used the word awareness today, and that's what we're going to be doing a lot of this week. Because the only thing that we know is that of which we are aware. I mean, in other words, I think I use in the book, if somebody leaves you $1 million in the bank and forgot to tell you the name of the bank, or didn't tell you about it, you could starve to death simply because you are not aware that you are, or that you have inherited. You follow me? The point I'm trying to prove there is that if you're not aware of it, even though it exists, it doesn't exist for you unless you are aware of it. So we have to come to do two things. We recognize God is. Why? How? Because at some point God itself moves within us, both to will and to do, and makes us aware. That's the thing that happened to the prodigal son, that allegory. At some point, his inner woke him up, and he said, what am I doing here? That's the moment that we begin to recognize that there is something beyond our humanhood, something beyond me, something greater than Barbara is. So I have become aware that something is beyond what I know with my mind. We call that God, but it doesn't have to be called God. But I've become aware of it. Now, when I've become aware of its existence, with practice and hard work, I get to the point where I can recognize it when it's moving within me. I can recognize it when it speaks to me. I can recognize it when it moves me into action. On the other hand, it is equally important, since this human world that I'm trying to get out of is equal portions of good and evil. The other thing I have to learn to recognize is the devil. And if you don't know what I mean by that, for heaven's sakes, look at your glossary. Because the synonyms are Satan, the master called it Satan, Mrs. Eddy called it mortal mind, Paul called it carnal mind, Joel calls it personal sense, which I later understood to be belief system. And that's when it came alive for me, but that's my way. It has to come alive for you in your own terms. The point I want to settle here is recognition. We worked 30 years on recognition. Why? Because the devil only has power when you have failed to recognize him. In other words, that human consciousness that is radiating all of its erroneous conjectures for hundreds and thousands of years is like a great radio station sending out error and lies and stupidity 24 hours a day, and we tune in and accept it. Now it's mine, and it's a law under my life. So what I have to do is to learn to recognize when I'm tuned into the wrong channel. Is that making sense? Does that answer your question?
Oh, so by laying your soul faculty open, you mean all of this hard work?
Yes, yes. Now, gosh, I didn't want to get into how the world works so soon, and maybe I won't. Maybe I can do it in another way. Okay, we'll stipulate this, and then we won't have to do it again. You've all read Along the Royal Road, I know. You've certainly read the first chapter, which tells you there's nothing but God. Joel, you heard that today. There's nothing but God. But the clinker in that is that form is always born in a sleeping state. And that's where the evil comes from, is that we are born, as told in the second chapter of Genesis, asleep. In other words, the acorn is asleep to itself as an oak tree. It has no awareness of its potential and what it truly is. It only knows itself as this, right? That's all it's aware of. So, there's nothing but God. But because we're born asleep, we don't know that. We are not aware of that reality. Nonetheless, we're going to stipulate God is, and there's nothing but God. And God manifests itself as individual, not and, as individual being. In other words, the only reality that you are is God. Now, why do you think you're something else? Because you were born asleep. And all you know, as you have begun to unfold as your reality, is how far you've gone. Is that making sense? Okay. So you only are what you are aware of, and you are not aware, and none of us is, that God totality is manifesting itself as this life, this mind, this body, for its own purposes. So being asleep, we draw the idiotic conclusion that we have a life of our own. And that's what we call our humanhood. Now then, God and consciousness, because those are synonyms, is infinite. But I don't know, like when I drink this, I don't know all the water in the world. My soul is pure consciousness. Your soul, pure consciousness. That is the first thing that God manifests itself as, is soul. But soul then manifests itself, reducing its level of vibration into awareness. Now I am self-conscious. But I'm not conscious of soul, and I'm not conscious of consciousness. I'm only aware of who and what I think I am right here. So my soul, by definition, and it's in the glossary. I hope you all read the glossary. It would be a waste of my time if you didn't. My soul is my awareness. My awareness is that amount of which I am aware of the infinity of my consciousness. You follow that? Shall I say it again? Okay. Awareness is my soul. My awareness is my soul. Those are synonyms. And pure spirit, but born as it's manifest in a sleeping state. So my awareness, my soul, is individual with me in the sense that it's the amount of which I am aware of the infinity of my consciousness. Follow that? Shall I draw the picture? I have a wonderful picture that goes with this.
Please draw it.
Okay. All right.
Does not my consciousness know all?
Oh, your consciousness is infinite, but you are not aware of your infinite consciousness. You are only aware of the amount you're aware of. Do you see? Now, I'll draw you a picture, maybe it'll be clearer.
Because of the sleep.
The Eastern philosophers have a statement that I love. It says, one becomes two, two becomes three, and from three are the 10,000 things.
And
Now, the way of illustrating that with a picture is,
10,000 things.
here is infinity. Everybody knows that symbol, I'm sure, right? You see it? Mm-hmm. Okay. That's infinity. That's God. That's consciousness, because those are synonyms. Now, it manifests itself. Joel once said, God is a funnel, and I'm the outlet. And that's what gave me this image. This is soul. This is still consciousness, but it's mine. This is God manifesting itself as my consciousness, my soul, if you will. Now, this is I am. This is my I am. As Joel says, as long as you live and how many times you'll die, you'll never lose your sense of individuality. Your I will always be your I. And you will always be aware of it. Now, soul then continues, this force, this life force, this God, continues to manifest itself. And this, at this level, it becomes mind. See that? Now, I am is not mind. I am is God. And my soul is my portion of God of which I am aware. This is mind, and it is right here is my awareness. This is the point at which I become self-conscious. Now, oops, I was warned about that. Mind, because this is a perceptual universe. Anybody in doubt about that? You know, Locke gave it to us in the 18th century. Perceptual universe. In other words, Locke said it succinctly. Everything, your world is only what you see. And that's true of everybody. At this point, mind becomes creative and begins to create. This is one, becomes two, becomes three, two is soul, and from three come the 10,000 things. Now, 10,000 things is simply a poetic symbol for everything in the visible world. Everything. It's not 10,000, it's 10, 100, billion, million, trillion, quadrillion things. But the poet says, from three, in mind, come the 10,000 things. That means that when this has reached here, mind begins to create its perceptual world. That clear? Okay. Now then, born in a sleeping state, asleep to reality is what that means. So
What is it that's asleep if we're, this is infinite consciousness?
form. The statement is, form is always born in a sleeping state, like the acorn and the oak tree, like the seed and the tomato plant. That's the sleeping state of an oak tree. You follow me?
Yeah.
Man is born asleep. Second chapter of Genesis, Adam went to sleep. The minute he was created, he went to sleep. And then is where all the trouble started, because he started to name things. And that's where good and evil came from. But the minute Adam began to name things, he started to have opinions. And he started labeling good and evil. And the minute that they ate of that tree, they gave birth to good and evil in the form of Cain and Abel. That's the allegory. So the ignorant mind, this is the ignorant side of mind, creates its world in ignorance. And that's where good and evil come from. Now, when soul still pushes in through here and gradually wakes it up, at some point it comes awake and there's a spark of light. And there's something more. Or maybe you're on your knees praying, please God help me, I can't. It's got to be better in some way. Whatever you do that puts a little light to your candle will start you on the path back to your realization. That clear? Now, as this wakes up, it still is creating every day, it's creating its world. You make your world every day by your choices and by your thoughts. This begins to improve gradually. And it improves gradually until one day, if you're lucky, you get a great teacher like I had who comes along and tells you the truth. And now you can begin to make your world conform to what is being taught to you from your own within. Is that clear? Okay. So, does that explain sufficiently what soul is? Soul is my awareness. Consciousness never changes because it's infinite already, but my soul changes and my awareness changes. It can grow and I can increase in awareness. In fact, just recently I realized that my whole 30 years of work has been nothing except to help the students increase their awareness of what? Of truth, of reality, to make them able to see what is already there. You don't do anything but uncover the truth is already there. One other thought. As I become more aware, even God makes me study, do you see? There's nothing but God, and even God pushes us to know Him. But as my awareness increases, my spout increases. And now there's more of God flowing through. And I can continue to do that. I can continue to make my soul as big as I want to continue to make it. As long as I'm willing to be in a state of surrender, as long as I'm willing to know that there's nothing but God and it constitutes my being, and I get out of the way and let it function, it sees to it that my awareness increases. And there are people in this room who can bear witness how much our awareness has increased in 30 years. Have I answered sufficiently the questions on that subject?
When we make our transition and we are reborn, are we reborn with the same degree of awareness?
Exactly.
That.
And I mean exactly. Dying does not move anybody forward on the path. With one exception, little tiny thing, it is in a book somewhere, in one of my books. Nobody goes until he's ready. And therefore, it is that little spark of saying, in effect, okay, Father, here I am, let's go. That surrender, that letting go, that trusting moves us forward. But not too much. You come back just about where you left off. You know, this is God's school. The book made that amply clear. We are in school. And every mistake we ever make only means that we need to learn something we don't yet know that would help us not to make the mistake. It's nothing but a learning process. And that's why there's no judgment. That's why God judges not. That's why he says approved at every stage of our development. He knows we're just little growing plants. And the mistakes we make, if we knew how to do it better, we would do it better. And who's to teach us? He is. Who
When
else?
we are reborn as what?
What do you mean, reborn
Homo
as what?
sapien?
Excuse me?
Homo sapien, you know.
Well,
terms of our form.
you see, the Hindu way of teaching reincarnation, this is also in the book, is error. Because they teach retrogression, and there's no such thing. You never go backward from a state of realized consciousness any more than a full-blown rose could become a bud again. Just impossible, because unfoldment is to infinity. Where would you go back to? You're continuing to unfold. The very life force that's created you in the first place and has pushed you to where you are today is continuing to flow through you and will continue your unfoldment. So that Homo sapiens, we've been born a million times as everything else. So if you are Homo sapiens today, at least you'll come back as that. You follow me? I do not believe that that's the end, however. You know, we have in the Bible, you made him a little lower than the angels, and Joel is one of his tapes that maybe I'll play this week, I'm not quite sure. He says, talking about development, the development of an individual, and he said, and maybe like the angels.
What is an angel? I don't believe it's something that's fluttering there in wings.
An angel, there are angels. Angel is an epithet that some people give to the bodhisattva consciousness. And the bodhisattva consciousness are those individuals of enlightenment who have gone far beyond where we are, who, in the Hindu sense, this is the way they say it, will not enter nirvana until all men enter. So they are willing to come back. And, I mean, Jesus was a bodhisattva, for instance. It's obviously Joel was a bodhisattva. There are those who come back to help because they will not go into the highest thing as long as there's sinning, sick, and suffering human beings around.
There's a need.
Yeah, those are angels. And as a matter of fact, part of the way the world works is they are assigned to individuals and to groups to help us when we are too stupid to help ourselves. Everybody has an angel until he doesn't need one anymore, and then he's sent off to help somebody else who needs it, or her, as the case may be.
Whispers.
Yes.
Excuse me. Barbara, I'd like to ask you something. If a student like me, I'm new here, new to this, and with this seminar that you're having here, and maybe you said something about awareness.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why I came, and one of the reasons why I that drew me to this is that I was in something else. I can say that I was in another part of the truth today. I'm not going through all of that because I think everybody has to have a chance to have something to say. And it came to me, well, Berta, you need to leave that alone and get more awareness. Mm-hmm. And you said that to me. And that is one of the things that Drew, I've been meet to come to your class, because I said it appeared that I came. Now, I don't know all the principles, although I was brought up in unity, religious science, all that, but this is really different. And from what I found, from what I could read, what I could hear on the tapes cut. But that is not like a teacher. I am a teacher myself, and I know she is a teacher, because we met over the telephone, and I said, "You're a teacher." And this is, to me, as a new student, I have heard a lot of things, but I want to know, although the degrees don't mean anything, I want to know the nitty-gritty. Start at the beginning to let me know something about the infinite wave. That's all I have to say.
Well, the class always draws the class. I don't prepare a class other than with meditation.
Yeah.
So if you draw out what you need from the class, you will have done it.
Okay.
But certainly we're going to work with awareness.
Huh?
We're going to work with awareness.
Yeah.
But I could feel the heat of some of the questions, and so I want to satisfy some questions before we get into what my share of the work is going to be. Anybody have any more? Yes.
Yeah, I still have a question about this statement you made, that form is born asleep. And I read that in your book, and I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now. What my understanding is that we're not form, we're consciousness, and our form is in our consciousness.
Oh, absolutely, it's in your consciousness.
But so then, when I said, what is it that's born asleep? You said, you are, but I'm not the form. So.
Oh, yes, you are. Oh, yes, you are.
I know as a human,
No,
in
wait
the
a minute.
personal sense of self, I identify with my form,
No,
with
I
the
don't mean
body.
that. I don't mean that. Remember what Joel says, because he's the one that brought that truth to the earth, that God constitutes individual being. Manifesting itself. Manifesting, that means making form.
Okay.
Do you see that?
Right.
So it is God manifesting itself
As form.
as form.
Which is
right.
the spiritual universe, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, it's a mental universe connected to the spiritual. The only thing that is not real is what we believe of the visible world. What we see, hear, taste, touch, or smell is illusion. But the reason that we perceive an illusion is because we are asleep to reality. In other words, consciousness has reduced its rate of vibration into manifested form, and you can't argue with me about it, because Joel always said, nobody knows where the evil came from. We only know that it got started, and we have to deal with it there. But one day in a class, I don't know how many years ago, somebody asked that question, and I said, I don't know. I said, I've never been told. Joel never answered that question, but let's take it into meditation and see if God will give us an answer.
Right.
And in about 2 seconds, the voice said to me, form is always born in a sleeping state. So if you don't understand it, you'll have to ask God to clarify it for you, because that's where I got it. And I understood it immediately, because I immediately saw the parallel with an acorn. And there is a form, or a seed, but the seed is asleep to its reality. The acorn is asleep. I mean, to use the word asleep, that's the way God said it to me. Was form is always born in a sleeping state. And then I immediately remember the 2nd chapter of Genesis. Adam went to sleep, and a mist went up.
Right.
And that's the mass hypnosis that went over the world. Right then, do you see? And that's what we've been working our way out of ever since. So that it's only form that is born in a sleeping state. Why? Because that's the way God made the world. Everything starts, in the visible world, everything starts with a seed, right?
Right.
The seed is the beginning of the visible world.
Right.
It is asleep to its fulfillment. Any seed.
Right.
You see? Now, naturally, I'm assuming the acorn has self-awareness, which it doesn't. But you have to use some metaphor to teach, and that's a very clear one to me. that the acorn does not know it's an oak tree. Man, being born asleep, does not know that God is its consciousness. And that's where the trouble comes from. And then I saw where evil began. It began in Adam's ignorance. So that he is not able to draw right conclusions about what is happening to him. And then the trouble starts. Does that help clarify? Otherwise, let me ask you to do this. Meditate. You've got 6 days to find out what that means. And go within and ask God to clarify it for you. And if it still troubles you, we will do it again and do it again. It seems so ultimately clear to me when I got it. I knew it was the right answer, and everybody in the class knew that that was the reason. That's where evil came from. That's where trouble came from. That's where discord came from. Is Adam?
I understand that part of what I don't understand when you're talking about form. You're talking about this body. I mean, or
yes.
what?
Yes.
That's where I'm confused.
No, wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
When in other words,
body,
when this thing came into manifestation.
This body, you heard Joel. Everything that you can see is an illusion.
Okay.
That includes the body.
Okay. Yeah,
See that?
I can understand. Yeah.
Anything you can hear is an illusion. The entire perceptual universe.
There's a misperception of what's really there.
There's a misperception. You've got the perfect word. And that was given to us. And I like it. For me, it works better than hypnosis.
So that's why I don't understand when you say form. What are you referring to?
I'm referring to what God was referring to when he told me that's where it came from. I am accepting form. In other words, consciousness manifests itself as form. True form. Real form. For instance, you have a body you can't see.
Not something corporeal.
No. Oh, there is no corporeal. Corporeal is an illusion.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about form, you're not... That's where I'm need to make a distinction.
No, it's a poetic use of the term form.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's what I'm...
It's okay. We have to wrestle with these things, and you're entitled to understand.
Okay. So in other words, when there's something manifested at, this something, the definition in its terms, it went to...
But when God said to me, form is always born in a sleeping state, that clarified the whole thing for me.
Right.
But I have to put that up against everything I see here tastes, touches, smells, illusion.
Yeah.
God is not in the illusion any more than he is in your nightmare. Because your nightmare is just a dream within a dream. This whole thing is the Adam dream.
Right.
This is a perceptual universe created by the mind of an ignorant man, ignorant mankind.
Right.
It's not real. It's illusion. So when God is talking and says to me, form is always born in a sleeping state, he's not talking about illusion.
Right.
He's talking about having manifest himself as form.
Yeah.
You see. As form, capital F.
Right. That clarifies.
Yeah.
I'm
That's
trying
right.
to identify the one with that, like you said,
well, if you
illusion
keep in mind,
there is no relationship.
That's right. If you keep in mind that there is no matter.
Mind.
It's all mind. And mind is creative, even at a human level. It is creative, and it is at that ignorant level that we perceive our world, make our visible world. Because everybody makes his own. So we have to deal with this duality. We have to deal, as Joel says, we are living in a world of seeming duality. And we have to understand both. Yeah? Anybody else got a quick question? Yeah.
You used the word discriminate a little while ago. Could you clarify or comment on discriminating versus judging?
Oh my gosh, you guys bring forward 30 years of work. We had a whole year on judging.
you might as well learn the difference between judgment and evaluation. We spent a year on it. But we spent a year not understanding it. We spent a year practicing judge not and learning the difference between. So here's the difference between judging and evaluating. A judgment, which we must not do, is a judgment by virtue of containing within it the concept it ought to be different. Evaluation evaluates, sees, uses the information that I can evaluate my own life every day. But it has no concept that it ought to be different. Now, in those terms, ask the question again. And then using... Let me use the theory that you answer. Yeah, okay. One night.
Talking about going to a museum.
Yes.
And seeing a wonderful work of art by someone who had great insight. And right next to it, for example, a piece of work that is not that of a genius. And somehow you respond to this wonderful piece, and the other you say this is a drag.
Right. We also studied for a year the right to preference. Everybody has judgment is not preference. Preference is not judgment. In other words, I have the right to go in the flower shop and buy roses and not lilies. But I am not saying lilies ought to be different. I am saying I prefer roses. That's my preference. And my preference is based on my own education, my cultural situation, my experience. I build my preference as part of my life on the basis of my experience. The only thing that makes a judgment is the idea that it ought to be different. You see, that is in violation of God's approval wherever anything is. And so we have to approve the lilies. We don't have to buy them. Does that answer that? I'm sure it's in the book that you have the right to preference. For instance, I can choose some people and not choose others. Jesus chose his disciples. Was that to say the other people were terrible? No. He saw in them what he needed. You follow me? We have choices, and they're legitimate, but it's based on preference, not on judgment. Do you see the difference? You know?
To a degree.
Well, if I choose this person to be a friend to, because I find this person interesting, and I'm not interested in somebody else, I don't think that person ought to be different. I don't think the one I'm choosing should be different. Think about it. You know, you're getting an awful lot of information here and today, so you have to think about some of these things. Remember this, we were given the definition. The difference between judgment and evaluation. Judgment we must never use, evaluation we must use all the time. If you don't evaluate, you won't be able to measure your mistakes and do differently. You know?
I think that's my point. It's the idea of the artist who has brought forth something that I see as wonderful, and the other is showing inexperience and lack of training. Now,
No, you can, for instance, I'll give you an exact example. I think this will fit. When a student comes to me, one thing that transcendental consciousness gives us, and we have no power over it, is the ability to read the heart, the mind, and the soul, so that I really know just where anybody is the minute I meet him. But it never occurs to me that they should be different, even though I can see them make mistakes, and I can see the mistake, and I know the mistake is making them suffer. And I know that if they didn't make that mistake because they're violating a spiritual principle, that they could relieve themselves of the suffering. But it would never occur to me to say that they should change. You follow me? So that if you look at if you have an educated eye and an educated culture, you can look at two paintings. You can say, this is an advanced painter, this is a beginning painter. But there's nothing the matter. There's no judgment involved with being a beginner at anything. Like there's no judgment involved with being a beginning spiritual student. And as the book makes abundantly clear, God says you're approved. When you're only this much of a spiritual student, you're still approved. And the painter is approved where he is. And there still is no reason. You couldn't avoid evaluating. If you're an educated eye and an educated culture, there's no way on earth that you could avoid evaluating. You can't not see that this is a beginning effort and that's an advanced effort. And you know what went into it, and you know why that one is that way and why this one is this way. But there's no judgment involved, because you're not thinking either of them ought to be in a place where he is not. Is that clear?
That makes sense.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I'd like to ask you about the healing work, Barbara. In the remark that we heard on the tape, that I acknowledge you as an appearance, and
I can't hear you. I can't hear you, dear.
In the tape that we heard this morning, where
Yes.
it said, I acknowledge you as an appearance, and I deny that you are good and evil.
Right.
How does that coincide with Joel's impersonalization and nothingizing? Would you say that this cuts
It coincides
through
directly. Absolutely, Harriet. It's absolutely
that, it
correlates.
cuts through the
Yeah.
other method?
Wouldn't it be dumb for me to say that you people aren't here and I can't see you? Well, you're an appearance, and I know you're an appearance, but I acknowledge that with the faculty of my eyesight, that my human eyesight is bearing witness to the fact that there are people in this room, right? So that's the limitation of my eyesight, that's all it can bear witness to. But back here, there's something else that tells me you're not people at all. And there's nobody in this room but I. And if I close my eyes, it helps me to know that. So that actually my eyesight is a faculty which is very limited. Now Joel says, I acknowledge you're an appearance. Just the same as if I were to say, I acknowledge you're an appearance. You are all appearing to me. But I don't believe in your reality as what you appear to be. Is that clear?
Yes, but where does the method then of impersonalization come in? Is that a separate form of
No, it's a little different. It correlates. I didn't say it was the same thing. It correlates in this way. In 1958, 59, he was told to go all around the world again because the students weren't getting the principles, and especially to teach impersonalization and nothingization as the function of healing work. Joel said that the basic premise that lies underneath this is all discord is the result of a universal belief in two powers. Universal belief in two powers, right? Okay, so that if somebody calls with a physical complaint, that meant that he would say, or if somebody were sitting in his office with a physical complaint, he would be able to say, yeah, I see you as an appearance, but I know that that problem is not in the person. It's not in the person. It is an impersonal projection onto the person from the universal, which is also another synonym for Satan, a universal belief in two powers, total error, carnal mind. So that the first thing you do is to distance the appearance from the person. That's impersonalization by definition. You remove the appearance from the person, recognizing it is not in the person. It is in the universal belief in two powers, right? And then the next step is obvious. If it comes from the universal belief in two powers, that is not a reality. Ergo, nothingization. That it has no reality, no law to support it, no power, by virtue of its being the impersonal universal belief, not fact, in two powers. That clarify that? Okay. Let's take a break, and if any of you has a train to catch and can't come back, that will be okay. And so we will take, 15 minutes? All right. The January letter speaks for itself. I sent it out in 1992, early, because I had been challenged to develop healing consciousness in myself and in the students at that level. And so, as usual, when I ask God a serious question, He has always answered me. And it was a serious question in my mind of why all healings were not instantaneous, or why they were not equal, why some took nothing but a smile and others took weeks and sometimes months. And the answer was they had not accepted a God of love who has never held them in judgment nor condemnation. So you see, we suffer from our own concepts, and that's what he was telling me. Especially guilt and remorse. And we have to accept forgiveness in order to be free. I also recommended 2 tapes of Joel's that have to do with healing work, and they are both remarkable tapes. I suggested to the class that they have those tapes, and along with Thunder of Silence, which we played today, and Deep Silence of My Peace. Those 2 I call the Alpha and the Omega of the Infinite Way. Thunder tells you how the mess got started, or what it consists of, which is hypnotism, and Deep Silence tells you how to get out of it. So, quickly through the recognition exercises. This is based on the fact that the devil only has power when you have failed to recognize him. And we spent 30 years perfecting ourselves in recognition. That means that when an event happens in your life, usually with another person involved, and it seems like the person is doing something to you, that you have to realize, recognize, it is not the person. It is the devil controlling the person, having its head and using it to get you upset. I think it's made clear in one of the books that the devil doesn't care. Now, devil, you know what I mean. I'm not going to take much time going into that, because read the glossary. There is a malevolent mental force that operates in the world, which is composed of human thinking, a collection of human thinking for millennia. And that's what we call the devil. Or as Jesus called him, the father of lies. It's all the lies the world has accepted, wrapped in one pot and constantly boiling, out there like a radio transmission. And if we receive it and allow it to enter, it now is a law unto our lives. Even though of itself and in itself it has no reality and it has no power. But if we accept it as a power, we have given it our power, and now it is. So that aspect of life only has power in our lives to wreck it if we have failed to recognize what it is and where it's coming from. If we think somebody is doing something to us without realizing that the devil has the head, and it's back there, the human universal parent, universal belief in two powers, that is causing this person to behave in this way. Well, number one, if you don't, you can't forgive. And if you can't forgive, you'll never get the rocks out of your gut. Because only forgiveness takes the pain away. So we do it the way we want to. Now, what is it that we have to recognize? And these are the things that we learned we had to recognize. I recognize, I'm just going to do one with you to show you how to do it. I recognize that since I was born human, I was born hypnotized, and I have been unaware of that. Now, tape after tape after tape, including the one we heard this afternoon, Joel makes that clear, that all human misery and discord is the result of being born into a hypnotized state. Or as I say it, born, well, I didn't say it, Papa said it, but I say it now, being born asleep is the same as Joel to say being born in a hypnotized state. And he says we are born into it. What does that mean? It means that this entire 3D world is a hypnotized state. And when we are born into it, we are born into the hypnosis. And we will stay there and add to it and reinforce it with our thinking until some great spiritual light comes along and says, hey, that's not reality, it's over here. And then we can turn, which is what the word repent means, and live a different way and learn little by little. Now, this hypnotized state is always the result of dialogue. It is the result of language and suggestion for millennia that man has accepted as a reality. And since it came in the form of dialogue, I call it brainwashing. We have been brainwashed into believing all of this dialogue. So the exercises that we have were given to me for the purpose of reversing the brainwashing, reversing it. For instance, I remember in one class, somebody was talking about what a rough childhood she had had, and that her mother was always saying to her, you'll never amount to a hill of beans. You'll never do anything right. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Most of us have heard that, or something similar. So I said to her, well, in fact, her question was about why did we have to do the exercises? So I said, how many times do you think you heard that? Oh, she said, oh, hundreds. And I said, well, then get going. For everyone you ever heard, you have to reverse it. It has painted and painted and painted and painted this error on us until we are broken down with the burden of it. And the only way that you will get rid of it, since it went in with dialogue, is to deny the dialogue. And that's in spite of the fact that we don't use affirmation and denial. I mean to reverse it. So that the way to work with this exercise is to say it out loud. There are 7-day exercises, and you use one each day. And the next week you go back to the first one. To say it out loud and with vigor as if you believed it, which you don't. Now, somebody tell me that he believes that he was born hypnotized. No, you don't. But it's the truth. So how are you going to go from not believing it to believing it? You have to go the way it went into you in the first place. You have to reverse the brainwashing. And even though when you say, I recognize that since I was born human, I was born hypnotized, and you don't believe that. And you know you don't believe it. So you say it again. And you have to do what was done to you. And little by little, this mind set in concrete, the conditioned mind that the master says we have to give up, and Joel says we have to give up, and I say we have to give up, and I know we have to give it up because I and my class have done so, with results following. You have to continue to use this. You don't have to. I don't care whether you do the exercises or not. They are offered for your consideration. And in previous classes, some of the new students, oh no, that's nonsense. I don't need that. I'll just meditate. Only nothing changed in their lives. And then later on, when they finally, they would call me and they would still have the same old problem, and I would say, are you using the declaration? In this case, it was declaration exercises. No, I read them. I said, do you use them every day? No. I said, well, you have no results. We have discovered over all these years that this pathway is hard work, and that nobody walks it successfully without being willing to do the hard work that is necessary to break down your conditioned mind, my conditioned mind, so that after you struggle with that one, until it begins to have some sense to you, and that you can at least begin to accept the idea that maybe it is true that I was born hypnotized. If you can't accept that, there's no way you're going to want to get dehypnotized. How could you? If you don't believe you're hypnotized, there's no reason to be dehypnotized. And yet you heard Joel say today that that's the only way to get out from under, is to be dehypnotized. So then on the second day, having become perfect on the first day, I recognize that every discord, I recognize that every discord, every misery, every pain that has ever come to me has been due to my acceptance of the hypnotic suggestions of this world. And if you have to take it one word at a time, I recognize. And then ask yourself the question, do I recognize? And if you're honest, you'll have to, no, I don't. I want to recognize, but I don't. Well, if you want to learn to dance, you have to begin by learning first position. And then you learn second position. And then you learn third position, etc. If you want to play piano, you have to get a good teacher, and then you have to put your hands on the keyboard. So it is with this. This is a school we are in. There are methods to be learned. We can conform to God's law with our lives, but you have to learn what they are and how to function with them. And this is an exercise. And it is a mental exercise. These statements in themselves have no power at all. It's a mental exercise whose purpose is to reverse the brainwashing. So down, well, let's go on. I recognize that the only way to be free of these limitations is to become dehypnotized. It follows logically. That is to destroy my conditioned belief in good and evil. You heard that this morning. And that was also one of the 3 tasks that God gave us to do in 1990. First one was destroy your belief system. So that will help you do this. I recognize that the hypnotized person cannot dehypnotize himself. Somebody has to come in and wake you up. But that God consciousness can and will do that if contacted. So, what's the problem? Right there. On day 4, stumbling block.
Contact.
God will dehypnotize me if what? Contacted. So what's the problem? How do I contact God? Well, we'll solve that one for you this week. I recognize that conscious resting in the presence of God lifts the hypnosis and sets me free. And as a matter of fact, that's what we do when we meditate in this room. We are lifting the hypnosis because an awful lot of us, if not all of us, are in God contact. I recognize that the faculty, and this is a very important one, that I must use to achieve this conscious God contact is my faculty of awareness, an instrument totally separate from my mind, i.e., you cannot contact God with your mind. On day 7, I recognize that I must practice getting into the lap. That means, that's my way of saying into the silence, the great silence, which is not the same as being silent. A lot of people mistake meditation as being silent. No. You can be silent for 10 hours and not be in the silence. And I've been in meditating groups where that was taking place, where they thought they were meditating, they were just being silent. If you have no results from meditation, you haven't been meditating. So that into the lap means getting into the great silence until, and it says practice, until I can stay there at will and until I receive my assurance that there is nothing that needs to be done. That's a little bit of work. So you want to play with that one? You can. Now I want to take a few minutes to make sure that you heard these tapes today. The Buddhists say the man of illumination regards every living being as if he were his only child. Now, what is the significance of that? Well, in 1990, in the Yosemite class, God gave us 3 major tasks, and they're mentioned at the end of Along the Royal Road. He said, you have 3 major tasks. This is the voice in class. 1, destroy your belief system in good and evil. And that meant destroy it. Absolutely burn it up, carve it out of your mind. Never, ever, ever again break the first commandment or judge good or evil. And that's quite a task. But we got it in 1990. We've been working since 1962, and the class was able to do that. It's amazing when you have given up judging good and evil. At first, I didn't realize I had done so. I kind of looked back and I said, you know, that's gone. And the whole class got very good at step 1. Step 2 said, learn to be real. Well, how would one go about doing that? And God didn't say be real, he said learn to be real. So again, it was a practice. How would one go about doing that? You don't know how to learn to be...
Honesty would be the first key. With yourself.
Suppose you can't be honest, Dulcie. It's really as simple as stop being false. Stop being a do-gooder. Oh, I'm anticipating that question. Stop trying to please people. Go within and touch who you really are, and then demand that that be expressed. In other words, if you stop being false, you'll begin to be real. If you stop trying to manipulate your life or get ahead by pleasing people, that's the false self. Because that means you think people are your source of supply and God is. You just have to begin to examine yourself of, wait a minute, do I believe that, or was I conditioned into that belief by my mother or my grandmother or my teachers or somebody or my bosses? Or do I really believe that? And that's what you have to do, one onion skin at a time, is to find out what you think, what you feel, what you believe. And you may be wrong, but at the moment, you'll be real. Your reality may change then, but shuck off your conditioning. That means to be real. And that has to be learned, and God knew it, and that's why he said to us in that way. The last, of course, and the most difficult step of all is learn to love. And there is no love in the 3D world. It doesn't exist. No human being has the capacity to love. There's only one love. In fact, in the 3D world, love is a 4-letter word, and it causes a lot of trouble. In the real world, love is of God, and that means you have to be in touch with God, and you have to be able to get out of the way and let that love flow through you to the world. That's how you learn to be loving, is by making God contact and letting it have its way with you, and that it does its job. And we have exercises for that too. That one is called the cast your bread exercise, which was what we're not going to do this week probably. So, this thing from the Buddhists, the man of illumination regards every living being as if he were his only child. It's a very good definition, and it bears thinking about. I don't think many of us look on all of our brothers and neighbors as if he or she were our only child. And yet, that's what we have to come to. If we are to be loving, that is the milestone that one day we have to pass. And it's possible that, like everything else on this pathway, it has to be practiced. Joel talked about the meek inheriting the earth. I think it was Joel, maybe it was me. No, I guess it was me. The working word there is inherit. Because if it's examined, I think it's easy to see that who inherits the earth? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. So who inherits it? The meek, Scripture tells us. And as I mentioned on the tape, I learned that meant the obedient. And in Along the Royal Road, I make very clear that God speaks only to his Son, Jacqueline. And how do you prove that you are the Son of God? The way any child would prove it, by obedience. Human children can be disobedient without being disenfranchised. But the spiritual son cannot be disobedient without being disenfranchised. So that the proof that we are the Son of God is, are we obedient? Well, all we can do is be obedient to what we know. There are higher laws and higher laws and higher laws as we grow in spiritual development that we in turn have to become obedient to. I can remember, for instance, it was quite a number of years ago, we had been working for about a year on forgiveness, did pretty well. And then we had a year where it said, take the thorn out of his flesh. Now that has to do with the scriptural story of if you go to the altar with your sacrifice and there you remember that somebody has aught against you. Not that you are angry with somebody else, but that somebody else is angry with you. You may be right and they may be wrong, but he's angry with you. Then the scripture says, put your sacrifice down, put your gift down, and go and take the thorn out of your brother's flesh. Go and make your peace, the language is exactly, and then come back. So that we learned that meant take the thorn out of his flesh. And that meant if you were right and they were wrong, you still went to them and said you were sorry and asked to be forgiven. You'd have to take the thorn out of their flesh. If you want to make a gift that's pleasing to God. Now, that was down the line a piece, and it was a shock when that lesson came through. But within a year, they were all doing it. And now it's not hard anymore. We know now that the smartest thing you can do for yourself is to rush to forgiveness. Yes?
That question, suppose you try to make peace with your brother after the mistake you made, but there's no forgiveness on their part.
Doesn't matter. You've done your work. You are never responsible for the reaction of the other person. That is not your responsibility. Only your behavior is your responsibility. How they respond to it, that's his problem, or her problem, as the case may be. Not your responsibility. You have done your work. And then it's God's problem. It's God's problem to deal with the person the way God dealt with you to make you want to ask for forgiveness. Literally, who do you think moved you? I mean, it's a hypothetical situation, but in this situation, who moved you to ask for forgiveness? Your indwelling God consciousness moved you to do that because it was the loving thing to do. So if he isn't working in that one, that's because that one is not listening. And you've been listening. That just means you're at a different place on the path from where that one is. And you're not responsible. And likewise, if somebody has done something to you, and you're under this particular admonition, if you reach the milestone that says take the thorn out of the flesh, and you go and say, I'm terribly sorry that there was this friction, and I ask your forgiveness, even though you may know and he may know that he was wrong and you're right. And he still might want to say, I don't forgive you at all, I'm still mad at you. That's not your responsibility either. Only that you did what was right. That's marks on your, what's the word I look for that? On your resume. It looks good on your resume. And it's not easy. We didn't get that lesson until 20 years after we had been working. And it's not easy. I remember the first day that came through in the class, and one of the students said, what if you'd rather be mad? And of course, that's where you begin, is that and Joel has it on a tape. He was talking about forgiveness, and he said, sometimes somebody could do something so terrible to you that you'd have to say, Father, I can't forgive that, but I will get out of the way and let you do it. You forgive them. And then he says, and of course, in that process, I was really beginning to forgive myself. So it's not easy. We all know that. It's practically it's almost the end of the road for a human being. When a human being gets to the understanding of what enlightened self-interest it is, enlightened self-interest to forgive, then we got to where we rushed to it. Because I don't want to carry that knot in my stomach. And it doesn't go away until I've reached forgiveness. So it's for me. They don't need my forgiveness because God's already forgiven them. God forgives you before you make the mistake, and I know that. So that person that I'm having such a hard time with doesn't need my forgiveness. God has taken care of it. I need it because it takes the rocks out of my center. The pain goes away when I forgive. It's the most practical thing in the world if one is having a roiling in the solar plexus, is God Bless the Japanese in Along the Royal Road? Lily, do you remember? I don't remember either.
I don't think so.
Oh, that was one of the greatest lessons we ever had. I was reading a book written by the wife of the English ambassador to Japan at the turn of the century. And at that time, there was a lot of turmoil because England was coming in hard and heavy into Japan and wanting to make trade treaties and so on and so forth. And there was a bunch of young military cadets, very zealous, and they were assassinating the Japanese officers. And one night, she entitled this "A Sad Story," and indeed it was, but it was true. There was a minister and his wife who were missionaries in Tokyo. And one night they were invaded by 6 of these cadets who came in and dragged her husband out of their bed, took him into the hallway. She came rushing after him and hacked him to death in front of her. And she told this wife of the ambassador, "I knew I worked and worked and worked until I could get to God Bless the Japanese, because I knew if I didn't do it instantly, I would never be able to do it." Well, that was a lesson for us. And we took that seriously. And so there's a sort of an in phrase among us when recounting a very difficult situation where it was hard to forgive, to say, well, I finally got to God Bless the Japanese. And it's a place where everybody has to get someday. She did it. We decided if she had been able to do it, it was possible to do, as difficult as it might have seemed. And so with a couple of years on working on forgiveness, we finally got to where we could do it. And so little by little, that's how this way of life works. You learn one step at a time. And in fact, sometimes it's 2 forward and 1 back. But that's the way that goes too. Oh, I gotta go.
Yes.
No, I want to take a few minutes, if you can, to start you on the awareness exercise. First of all, your awareness faculty is not your mind. It is a totally different instrument. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. I'm going to rush you through this tonight. We'll finish this tomorrow. Close your eyes. Now, I want you all to see me with your ears. I'm serious. And of course, nobody can do that, right? Why? You used the wrong instrument. You used the instrument that God did not give us to see with. You used the instrument God gave us to hear with. Now, touch me with your ears. I want you to make an effort to do it. Until you realize that no matter how hard you were to try, you would not be able to do it. No matter how hard you would try, you'd have to be given an E for effort. You would not be able to use a wrong instrument to achieve the result you're trying to achieve. You have to pick up and use the instrument that God gave us for that function. Right? Right?
Yes.
Okay. The mind, or let's say the body. The body is an instrument, as Joel says, of physical awareness, which helps us to communicate in this 3D world. The mind is an instrument of intellectual awareness, and at its other end, an instrument that can touch the awareness, so that in using the mind to educate the mind out of itself, which is one of Joel's favorite phrases, we can use that instrument up to the point of the end of reason. The mind can only go up to the end of reason. It's as far as it goes. That is its periphery. Now, you know the dogs hear more than we do. Eagles see better than we do. So that for every faculty there is a range. And there's some place where ours ends off and theirs begins. I'm talking about an eagle now. Likewise, we can use this mind fully for its function of intellect, ratiocination, studying a book, reading a book, using language, things of that nature. That's the purview of mind. But it cannot go beyond reason. If you want to go beyond reason, you have to pick up another tool, and you have to put mind down. And that other tool is your awareness faculty. Most people don't even know they have one. I didn't for a long time. I think I've established that part of natural law is that you cannot decide what you're going to do with your instrument. You can only use it for what it was designed to do. Any instrument, smell, whatever, right? That's just the way the world works. Mind, you can't use your hand to reason with. So you have to put all that down if you're going to use the range of mind. And likewise, you have to put that down when you pick up the awareness faculty. Now, I'll show you what that is. Be aware of your ears. Close your eyes and be aware of your ears. Just be aware.